We're back, guys. We got Marcia Earhart on. She lost 2 sons, and she's healed from it. And I believe that her testimony shows that if she can heal from that, we can heal from our addiction stuff. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe. Let's go. Enjoy the episode. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Sober Fix podcast. We've got another great guest on. We got Marcia Earhart. She's a certified grief, trauma, mental health, brain, and health coach. She started the Sterling Rose Sanctuary, which we were just talking about. Really cool stuff. I'm really excited to get into her story. She's also an author. We'll get into the book as well. But Marcia, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It is great to be here, to be able to talk with you about all of these amazing things.
Yeah, and it's, I remember when someone reached out to me and I read kind of your bio and everything, and I just found it so interesting. And we were talking about it before we started, but there's a lot of connections between grief and loss, trauma that people have experienced, mental health related stuff, and addiction. I just find that there's a lot of it that are interconnected. We were just talking about that, but I want to kind of start off. Where do you live now, and where did you grow up?
I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was there the majority of my life. We've been in Florida for 14 years, and we raised our kids. I mean, some of the kids were raised in North Carolina, and the rest, the last 2 were raised here in Florida. So we love it here. It is definitely my place. I do not like cold, so this suits me very well.
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm in California and the weather's perfect. I
Yes.
went to Indiana recently to visit family, and it was snowing on the last day, and I'm walking around. I thought I had enough clothes on. I definitely did not. And I realized pretty quick, I'm used to California, but I want to kind of dive into what was childhood like for you? What was it like growing up over there?
Well, I would say I was the baby of 4 children. So my siblings were 8, 9, 12 years older. So I learned a lot by watching and observing and paying attention. I loved my family. I really value my upbringing. My parents taught me well how to grieve. I had significant losses. I had 17 losses by the time I was 18 years old that were pretty traumatic losses. And my parents really did show the example of how to grieve. So grief has been a part of my story, Drew, ever since I started life. The first memory was 3.5 years old. So grief did not define me, but it did redefine my life, I believe, because I grew up knowing the brevity of life, how precious and valuable this life is. So I was a little more serious, and I would say in some ways, because of the experiences I had, my childhood didn't look like other children, but I am really thankful because I think it also protected me from getting into trouble and making some wrong decisions along the way. And I had a very healthy community with family, community of people that I knew loved me and valued me, and I knew my worth. Growing up as a child, I knew I was deeply valued. I knew I was loved. I knew that I needed to trust who God created me to be over the fact of other people telling me I needed to be something else. And actually, I was bullied my entire life up until probably somewhere in high school. I think they kind of stopped because they kind of had other things to do. So it was good because I did go to my own drum, and I literally was walking to the own beat of my drum. And I was very strong in my faith. And, there were people that were really strong in their faith that I was close to. They became my tribe. And, it's kind of middle school and high school, but I lived uniquely as to myself the way I needed to. So I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, and I want to kind of touch on what you said earlier on with, so many so many people that you lost early on. It was kind of similar for me, not when I was a child, but by the time I was 18, 19, addiction was full force in my life. I lost a lot of friends. I remember I almost feel like that was kind of the start of when things started to pick up for me because I lost a friend in a car accident when we were 17. And I had a friend who took his life a few years later, and up until that point, I had, like, I had a great childhood. I had a good family. I felt like I had good community. I was playing sports and stuff. But I remember when that hit, I didn't quite know how to deal with it, and so what I did is I started just turning to substances, and that's kind of how I coped, and that's when I started using every day. I wanna kinda ask you, how did you start to walk through some of that grief earlier on? Was it, do you think it was the fact that you had community? Was it your faith that you already had? What do you think helped you start to walk through that when you were younger?
I think because I was surrounded by so many older people in my life that really showed an example of grieving and what that looked like. But also, I did have a faith early on. And, I was just talking about this the other day. If I could go, and I have gone into myself and said to my younger self, thank you for trusting in Jesus. Thank you for trusting in the plans he had for us and not veering off, not giving in to things because of peer pressure, because you were being rejected. Thank you for knowing that, he is the only way. So I would definitely have to say that aspect, I believe, was my grounding, is the belief in him and who he said I was, and I think the reinforcement of my mother was amazing. I remember I would have struggles about different things, and I would come to her and say, "The kids have said this or that," and she said, "You know what, Marcia? God didn't make a mistake. He made you exactly the way you were meant to be, and if he wanted you to be any differently, then he would make you that. And you are, beautiful in the way that he has made you." And she would tell me really my identity in Christ. And I don't even know if she realized with what she was doing and that because she did it so well, I think it was just great. But she would remind me how loved I was, that, I had purpose. And she really encouraged me. I never liked Levi's. I mean, Drew, you're young, honey, but when I came along, Levi's became the big thing, and people were wanting to go rip that red tag off, and it was a real thing. And I hated Levi's. I just thought they were horrible pants for girls, and I just was not really a fan. And there were just like the Lacoste shirts, and they looked like guys. And I really loved my feminine side, and I like style. I liked, really wearing different things. My mom said, "You be true to who you are." And so that to me is what grounded me and what allowed me to continue to walk in my true identity.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that, and I wanna ask you too kind of about where you found your faith, because I know, and I'll kind of relate this to recovery and staying sober as well for me. There's a lot of people, a lot of friends that I've met, myself included in the very beginning. I remember, a lot of people would get sober and they'd hear like, "Look, it's going to help. You need God in your life. You need some type of spirituality. You need growth. You need change. You need connection. You need all this stuff." And they'd say the spiritual aspect of it is a big thing, and it's gonna help you overcome a lot of this addiction stuff, and it's gonna give you a better life, and people run into stumbling blocks with that, I've found, a lot of people when they're first getting sober, and so I wanna kinda ask you, how did you start to develop faith? How did you even get that started?
Well, I had this exchange at 3.5 with my father as I'm looking at my grandmother who was dead in front of me about where was she. I wanted to talk to her and hug her. And he goes, "She's dead." And he's explaining this. And I wanted to know, "Well, where is she?" And he said, "She's with Jesus." She was a believer. My father's side of the family, very strong in their faith. And I said, and so he started explaining that to me. And he said, "She's gone to be with the Lord." And I said, "Well, I want to see her." And he said, "Well, the only way you would see her again is if you accepted Christ." And anyway, he's just explaining to me. Well, I did end up accepting Jesus. And so I don't remember a time after that that there was the absence of him in my life. And by that, did it all just perfectly come into being? No, but it was the process of becoming so much more intimate relationally. And I had this conversation. I would talk to Jesus when I would go to bed as a little girl. And I just remember the intimacy of that. And to this day, I still have that very deep intimacy. And I can't imagine having life without him based on, as I was sharing with you before, the last 12 years of losing our older two sons, and many of the trials that we went through prior to that. He has been present for me. He's led me, talked to me, given me advice, wisdom, and discernment in those places. And he's fought my battles and he has brought healing in those places. And I think there's a difference, which I want to say because I work with people who have addictions, bringing them into healing. It is very different. Religion is not the same as a relationship. And I think people become misunderstood in the aspect of, well, I've accepted, and then it's just supposed to be this magical pill that things transform and change. As you and I are talking, there's an interaction here. And just like with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, He is never going to force anything upon us we're not ready for. And so there's this I need to be willing to be transformed, to have the mind of Christ. I need to be willing to surrender that propensity to want to go drink, to want to hurt myself. And what does that look like? That means that I know who I am by the word of God, because God tells us that we are chosen, that we're, chosen people, that we have a treasure, an inheritance awaiting for us, that we have been selected, and that He sings a song of delight over us. And so again, it's coming to know who you are, the value you are. And I know enough that in many of the programs, they have statements, declaration statements that y'all go through, that people go through. And so for a Christian, we look at who are we, and our declaration statement is our identity. And right now, as we look at the world, we're seeing an identity crisis all over. I can't tell you how many people come into the sanctuary going, I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know what purpose I have. I don't even know why I should be living. And so I will say, what do you believe about yourself? And they'll tell me, and then I'll say, well, who does God say you are? And quite often, I don't really know. So if I don't know who I am based on who I was created to be, I'm in an internal conflict. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I feel like there'd be a big internal conflict, and I've even experienced that before, where it was
Yes.
like I was trying to figure out my identity, and we talked about this a little bit before we started, but all of a sudden I got sober, and I was so used to running around doing all this bad stuff, and next thing you know, I'm trying to figure out my identity, and I'm trying to make my values align kind of with my actions, and
Yes.
that was tricky. I want to ask you, Marcia, you talked about the losing your two sons, which is horrible, and I want to ask about the first one. It was a car accident, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not too painful, I just want you to kind of just how did you find that out? Was it a phone call all of a sudden, or how did
Oh,
that?
no. Oh, no. And I'll just tell you, it was on February 14th. I woke up at 1:50 in the morning and I knew something was wrong. I laid there and I did. I said, Jesus, I need for you to be with me. And He said, I'm with you. And I felt Father God come and really surround me with His being. And I could feel a sense of internal tension of this is not going to be good. And within 10 minutes, the officers were knocking on our door and I was awake. And I said to my husband, you need to get up and go see who it is. And it was the officers. And we were in a coach home. So we went downstairs and they came in and I sat on the steps. And the father said, I have you. And I could feel the presence of Jesus, right? They were just holding me, the Holy Spirit. And they said, we've been preparing you for this. And I saw a reel in my head of everything through the years that had been preparing me for my son to pass before me. And so as the officers are talking, I'm in the presence of the Lord, listening and dialoguing with them and being held. My husband is there and, the words were, your son, Robert Sterling Earhart, won't be coming home again. He died immediately in a car accident. It was on our street. He was in law school on our street. He was driving on our street to go get gas and to pick up a friend, and they were going to be working on a paper that was due the next morning. He had just finished with a fundraiser at the school, and we had gone that night. My husband, my son, and myself had gone. And so it's interesting because I am sure somewhere there are officers that are really more engaging and more, uh, I would say, connected in the way they share information. But both times, the officers we had were very stoic, not engaging. They really were not at all like, I am so sorry for none of that. That's very grievous to me, especially as a grief and trauma specialist. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of humanity in that moment when you're telling people that information. And so that's where we were. And so that was on February 14th. And my daughter woke up. She heard, we wept. We, you know, she went back to bed. My husband and I went in our room and just cried and just sat there, realizing that our son Sterling would never be present again on this side. He would never be coming home. We would never be receiving that hug. We would never be having the exchanges. We had amazing conversations. We talked about everything. He was an amazing, incredible young man. He had lived a lot of life at 21. We did know that he would pass before us. It had been confirmed in 2008. He would die in a car accident. He knew that. We knew that. We didn't know when, we didn't know where. And so, were we prepared? I was spiritually. The flesh, I don't think, can fully prepare for the shock of that. I want to make that clear. But my spirit was ministering to my flesh, meaning that the despair, my spirit would speak the things to give me encouragement. I will never leave nor forsake you. I'm right here with you. That no matter how intense the fire, it will not consume you. So, I mean, there were scriptures that I had learned in the season that I grieved when the Lord had said that Sterling would pass, the aspect of that. And there was a good 6 to 9 months I grieved, and it was just a sowing of the word of God into me. Those exact scriptures that I would need to battle the war zone that I was in. And it is a war zone. It's a war zone because the enemy wants to lie and say things and take dominion in a place because, the enemy's job is to steal, kill, and destroy us. That's his main job. So, however he can do that, whether it's through a thought, through negativity, that becomes my life, through addiction, however it is, he is his only role. And if he can make us believe that what he sets up for us offers us some value of being able to cope better than he wants for us to enter it. And so we have to know truth in the midst of that. So it's owning the truth in the midst of all that's going on because there's so much internally. And, when we were talking about the inner battle, there's an inner battle that happens in that place. And there's death and there's life. And death says, you can't live anymore. This is life. You can't do this anymore. It's too hurtful. It's too painful. Life says there's more. There's so much more. But you're going to have to trust in the Lord and in that journey to renew you, to strengthen you, to let you walk into the new things. And a while ago, you and I were kind of talking about there's an exchange. We have to be willing to release that pain. And like when your friends passed, there was so much for you that you did not have tools. And so to anesthetize that pain is what you learned, but it really was hurting you worse. Because see, grief gets trapped in the body. If we're not releasing it and we're not intentionally releasing it, it goes into the organs of our body and into our mind. And that's why we see so much mental health crisis that we see today, because 95% of the people that can see a counselor and a coach, it's due to unresolved grief. And we have a world of people that can't afford and can't go. And it's still due to unresolved grief because they've been asked questions in the places that they are. So we have to find the ways we can resolve. Grief is going to be a part of our life throughout, from the beginning to the very end. And we're all going to see every single person around us, if we live long enough, die, we're going to die. So we have to have these conversations. We have to have the tools. We have to be able to know that Yes, there is a great Jesus, Father. First of all, I was created as an to bear the image of my Father. Therefore, he can give me what I need to bring this unbearable pain so that Jesus can carry it, because that's what Jesus, he wants to take our burdens. And we're all carrying these very heavy suitcases of pain and trauma, and we just keep dragging the suitcases, and in doing so, we're harming ourselves in our mind, our body, soul, and spirit.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Man, I'm just from the beginning where you're talking about, just the officers not being as friendly, I guess, or humane as they could, and just all the way through as you're talking about kind of dealing with the grief and man, just so much I can relate to, especially like we talked about losing the friends and stuff. And when you said carrying around the suitcases, wow, that hit home for me. I think before I got sober, before I found a spiritual life, I think I was carrying suitcases everywhere, and just trying to make it work. And I want to kind of ask you on the topic of mental health and coaching and stuff like that. I want to kind of ask, like, what do you think is, when you're working with people, what do you think is the biggest obstacle towards just living a fulfilling life or even having like decent mental health? Do you notice any patterns? Are there things today in 2026 what do you think is the biggest like stumbling block? What's holding people back from improving their life?
Well, we go back to identity, and if I'm living in shame and guilt, which pretty much 99% of the people that come in are living in shame and guilt, and I feel unworthy and I don't feel valued, then I don't feel that I should be able to live with purpose. That why would what would make me why? Because I don't have any worth. I mean, their mind, a mindset, if you're asking the mindset, it's what you have put in your mind. So the battle's in the mind. I'm going to tell everybody that's where we begin, the mind. It's mainly negative talk, negative belief systems, and 99.9% of it's untrue. So we have to start with the mind. And why, we go like in heart sync, we actually go in and we unpack what is going on in the mind. Like if you're feeling all those emotions, let's unpack each one separately. Where did shame come from? Where did guilt come from? Where did unworthiness come from? Where did a sense of reject? Where did the lack of that I have value come from? And then we ask those parts if they want healing. And I mean, they want healing because first of all, they felt they were living in their created design. That's the lie. This is who you are. You have no value. And so when we don't feel value, Drew, we treat ourselves, our bodies in a way that basically does harm to it. And so, it goes back to the suitcase. So the more negativity that goes on and the more stuff that I'm feeding in here, it's like the heavier the rocks become in the suitcase. And then I don't think I'm capable of unpacking it, and that there is actually a way to walk without this heaviness that continues to weigh me down and bring me back. Because sometimes people start in that direction, but then they're brought back and it goes deeper. I've seen people who have gone through rehab, they come out, they do well for a period of time, they go back and it's worse. And sadly, some people die because of it, because the body can't sustain that and handle that. Now, I've not worked with anybody in the Sterling Rose Sanctuary that has had that experience. We do see people healed. We see them enter into the stages of life where they were meant to.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I've seen a lot of that too, where people where they start to heal and they start to fight some of that negative self talk. I know I did, and you mentioned kind of going into rehab, and things look well for a little bit, but sometimes we fall back, and it seems like it. At least for me, I really had to get very consistent, and I had to start doing exactly what you just talked about, where I had to start battling that self talk. And I love that you mentioned that most of it is just not even true. Like I ran around thinking that all this stuff was true about myself, and I was feeding myself these negative things day after day, and I finally realized like most of it was just not true. It just wasn't. But I want to get into the Sterling Rose Sanctuary. First, I just want to ask you about. I know you mentioned your second son who
Yes.
had passed away. Can you just briefly walk us through kind of how you found out about that? How that came to be, and then let's get into your book and the sanctuary.
Sure. I actually was having quiet time with the Lord and doing Bible study, and the doorbell rang. And I got up, and there were two officers there, and they asked for my husband. And I'm thinking it's neighborhood related because we'd had the officers in our neighborhood quite a bit due to things with our HOA and different people in the neighborhood. And so my husband came to the door, and I stood there, and they said, "Are you da da da?" And is this your son? And they said, he is deceased and will not be with you anymore. And we're like, what happened? And they don't even offer any information. And I'm just going to be honest, it takes a lot to get me heated. And they're just like, you can call this number. And I went, what? You're coming and telling us our son is no longer alive. You're giving us a phone number. Absolutely not. I said, no way. You need to call that number and you need to find out. This is unacceptable. I was very upset. I'm sorry, you don't show up at someone's house, tell them that their son is no longer alive, and don't give any details. And that he's like, well, we don't know. I said, no, what they did, they stepped in our house, they called the detective in charge. I talked on their phone, and the detective said, I'm really sorry to tell you, your son and his girlfriend were murdered, and we're looking into who would have done this. And so we started having a conversation. And from there, our lives changed again, and that would have been on, like, October 29th, I believe it's a Monday, because were murdered Friday night, and they were not found, or maybe yeah, I think it was Monday that they came to us. They were found Sunday, and their six-month-old daughter was left to die. She was not shot. My son, Mark, and his girlfriend were shot and killed at point blank range, and so the young man had flown from Baltimore to Florida with intent to kill them. And they just had the court case. We're in 2026. They just had it in 2025 of December. It was 6 years in the making, and he was found to be guilty, and has 3 life sentences that he is to serve. So we've had bad news show up at our door more than once, and I would pray that I would not have that again. But again, we're not guaranteed, right?
Wow, so they showed up at the door again, and then they try and just drop that information on you and have you call a number?
Yeah. No, I was really heated, and the detective was really kind, and I said, "You cannot have officers show up at someone's house and go, 'We're not able to tell the information. You need to call this number.'" I said, "I suppose need some training in the way in which they give information." I said, "Because you guys are lacking empathy and compassion all the way around." I was really hot under the collar because, I mean, I'm well into, my career and what I do. And I am just someone needs to have some training for these men. And I'm sure there are women within the force, but this is unacceptable. And I was so angry. And the detective was very apologetic. But the reality is the men were just this stoic, "Well, I'm sorry, you don't your son's," and my husband just about passed out. And he's like, "What do you mean? What happened?" And they're not able to give answers. So yeah, I was upset, and we needed to make sure before you walk out of sight, we have an understanding as what happened to our son.
Yeah, that's not like, it's not like "Hey, your package was stolen from your door, here's
No.
a number, call it," like, it just I'm sorry to hear that, that's really rough. I wanna so let's just you went through the first son with the car accident, and you've done all this rebuilding after that, and then it happens again.
Yes.
And was it the same kind of deal? You just having such a strong faith in that relationship with God? Is that what helped you just continue through, or was it even harder the second time?
Actually, it was easier the second time, Drew. It's a great question. The reason why we had been it's just like an athlete who keeps training. I mean, we really had been in this applying and working and building our muscles and building our resources and our tools, and our toolbox was really full of those, and we had been implementing. I mean, you can have all the information. If you're not doing anything with it, you're not going to see the results. And so second time around, we were able to really pull those resources and tools to the front line very quickly, understand, because honestly, the enemy was hoping to shut down the Sterling Rose Sanctuary, and it's what he said. He goes, "Well, now you're not gonna be able," and the Holy Spirit immediately came back and said, "Oh, no, this is just greater fuel to continue," because he did not like the healing that was happening. The enemy doesn't like when anybody's healed. I need to make that clear. He's gained ground, he doesn't wanna lose ground, and especially if he's had you in, toxic behaviors, and he's been able to use and wield you and make you feel like that you're nothing and that you're never going to be able to amount to, I mean, because this is just the rhetoric. And that's why you have to know the rhetoric. But that was his purpose and intent was in this, not that he caused it, but in this, he was hoping they're going to walk away from the Sterling Rose Sanctuary. They can't keep doing this. We took time off for several months to grieve ourselves, to do what is appropriate for us to process and to incorporate. And as we needed time moving forward, we would take periods of time off in order for us to continue the healing process. And each of us have had extensive healing, and we're all healed. I mean, I would, if my son and my daughter came, they would say, "I'm healed. I'm healed." And what does that mean? I'm healed. That means that just like you and I having this conversation, I can talk about this. I'm not triggered. I'm not on the floor in a fetal position because it has triggered the pain in me so that I can't breathe. I can't really have the ability to converse with you. That's what being healed means. Now, if I were having a conversation with you and all of a sudden, and it's not that I could even cry, but if I start crying and start hyperventilating and I'm like, "Okay, Drew, I just can't discuss this. I can't talk about," then that would be an indicator that I'm not healed. And honestly, if I'm not healed, I should not be in a place to be able to work with other people because I work with other people that tell me far more horrific situations than even my own. And I've got to be very present in their space for their healing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's like you have to. It's kind of that concept of like, look, I need to heal myself before I can start helping others and stuff like that. Why don't you walk us through how the Sterling Rose Sanctuary kind of started, and what are you guys about for anyone that has never heard of it?
Well, the Sterling Rose Sanctuary is to give hope and healing to all people with trauma and grief so they can live in their created design by breathing again, moving again, and living again. And why breathing, moving, and living? When we have grief, we cannot breathe. It becomes very shallow. Our lungs are not getting the required oxygen into the body that is needed. So we do some breathing techniques, some diaphragmatic techniques with them and helping them to start getting the oxygen back into their body. And then we want for them to get moving. What do we mean? Get outside, go for a walk, go on the beach, go walk a trail, go walk your neighbor, get outside and start walking. Why? Because we want you for the toxins in you to be able to be released. And as you're breathing and walking around, that is releasing toxins. You're also breathing in fresh air and you're in an environment that is life-giving. We cannot, so many people just go inward, inside, and there is this healing component to being outside, to being in nature, to walking around and to be, engaging with that which is life. Even if there's some bleakness in the winter, you may see a little greenery here and there. And so it's encouraging us that life does come from death again. And that's the beauty, and that life is sustainable. Life continues. And so we want people to understand that, to experience that. And then as they're doing that, it allows them to start living again, to accept that, okay, I am no longer going to be that person anymore. I too died. And to release that and to embrace the new me in this part of life. And first of all, I can tell you, I don't want to try and recreate what was when my sons were living. We're never going to be able to do that. And that's okay. That was held a very special place, a very special time, and it's incorporated right here with me. It moves forward with me. But who I am now is based on the new creation, the new of what this season is to bring. And I have so much life left to live. And so I'm choosing to live from the tree of life. And the sanctuary is about, are you wanting to live from the tree of life, or do you want to stay and live in the tree of death? Because the tree of death, there's no life, none of sustainability. There's negativity. There's woe is me. Can't wait till my life is over. And you are not engaged with the people that love you. You're not receiving from the people that love you. But the tree of life, there's a flourishing. There's there's this hanging fruit. There's just abundance. It's engaging, and there's this exchange of love and life and laughter. So that's part of the Stolen Rose Sanctuary. We have heart healing where we work with individuals, whether it's addictions. It's addiction is a type of loss because people are like, and I said, no, you don't understand. Addiction, there's losses in addiction. They've lost the life that they should have had. They're now have they've this substance has redefined their life. So we need to go back for a redefinition of who you really are. We work with people that are sexually ritually abused, and we have numerous individuals that have had sexual ritual abuse as well as sexual abuse. All of those are losses. They're losses of health that we've worked with. We actually got to work with an individual when hospice came in to transition. We would take her into the presence of Jesus. And in the process of her life transitioning, she just really found it to be such a beautiful moment to be able to come in and heart sync with the Lord and be able to have the peace, the tranquility in that process. So we work with people from every aspect. And Jesus and Isaiah said that he came to open the door wide to set the captive free, to be close to the brokenhearted, so that he could bring healing and rebuild their ruins. That's for every person, not just a believer. We work with people who are not believers, but Jesus came to heal all people and to restore them unto themselves. And I have to be honest with you, in the process, there are people that come to know the Lord, not because it's what we are pushing, but because they see and they experience something so vastly different and they want that. And so I think that is that's one of the beauties of, I would say, the side effects of that. And again, we are here to bring healing. That's what we want to see. We want to see you live victoriously, not as a victim. And I feel quite often most people are living as victims based in their own circumstances.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just it's cool that people have that to go to, because I remember when we before we started, I was talking about I get messages sometimes from family members who have lost a loved one, and a lot of times it's like, hey, I had a loved one who overdosed, or they went to rehab for a little bit. Things were looking good, we thought things were going to be all right, and then they ended up going back to that, and they're no longer around, and people need somewhere to go. They need somewhere to people to talk to. They need some type of support. They need help. I mean, because I'm getting these messages on sometimes YouTube and stuff, which tells me that either maybe they don't have any close friends to talk to about it. Maybe they don't have like a counselor or therapist, or they don't have a program like your guys's. They haven't found somewhere where they can have that outlet and start getting that healing through conversation and through working to, doing a lot of the stuff that you guys provide. And so it's cool to hear just what you guys have going on, and I love it. It's a resource now, like you mentioned. If someone reaches out to me, I know where to send them as well for that kind of stuff. So,
Well, you did ask a
Marcia,
question. Yeah, you asked
go
me
ahead.
how it got started. The Lord actually gave me a vision and had me get up and write it all down. So we're now fundraising to get a place for people to come 3 to 5 days. We work with people all over the U.S. and in 7 countries now. And so we really would like this place to be able to have some of the tools that we use, and that they would be rooms. So we would have a rose and thorn room, and the rose and thorn room would be where we unpack the thorns in order to appreciate each petal on the rose and to be able to smell that sweet aroma again and fragrance of the rose. Because death kind of suffocates, takes away that sweet smell. So, especially if someone's overdosed or has died by suicide, we find quite often people that come here are ridden with guilt because they shoulda, coulda, woulda. Well, that is a death sentence. So we want to unpack that. We want them to be able to be resolved so they're living with truth, not a lie. We have the butterfly room, which is about the cathartic aspect of we let go of what was, what things, traditions that we've had, the mindsets that we've had, the way we did things. What things can we let go of? What things can we embrace? There's a cocooning in the time of grief that you've got to draw in so that you can learn the lessons and then emerge as the new butterfly. And we have a healing room where there will be somatic exercises and music where you can actually create music to release your grief and your trauma, art therapy. So there are going to be so many different modalities to help because we are not a one modality person. We are varied individuals as to what and how we need to express our pain and to be healed. So that's how it came to being. So right now, we are in this major fundraiser to get this property, and hopefully we'll have it by the end of the year. That's our goal.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I love it that you talk about just kind of the different rooms and everything. And kind of what I pull from everything we've talked about is like, as I kind of take a step back, is like grief. A lot of times, grief, trauma, whatever it is going on, like it can really make you or break you. Is kind of what I'm getting from all this. Do you believe that? Do you believe that it can be kind of channeled into something that ends up being a positive thing in your life?
Absolutely. When you said make or break, I believe that, we have to choose. Time will not heal anyone. Vaping's not going to heal you. Drinking's not going to heal you. Going and having sex with multiple people is not going to heal you. What's going to heal you is the intentionality to face what you're going through. And deny it would be to me like a child who is denying, well, this is what I would equate it to, a child who can walk, who still continues to get down on their hands and knees and crawl. So think about that because we have to choose to continue to go into there's this mindset. So you've got to make the choice. I'm going to choose to have healing and I've got to walk in it instead of denying it because that to me is very adolescent. We're going to live in grief our whole life. So start learning and grief should never define you. It should redefine you. And I think there's a spirit of grief. A spirit of grief defines. That means people that have said, I will never, and they don't ever get over. There are people that say, well, I'll always, and they do always have that mindset. So that's part of the spirit of grief. The grief with hope is that this is the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. And I don't feel I'm going to be able to be emerging out of this, but I know that there is more to life. And I know that God has greater things for me. And I am going to come out of this victoriously and allow for that pain to be purposed into your present life.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, it's like I kind of think back on my mentality when I used to tell myself kind of those absolutes of never going to be able to get sober. I'm never going to be able to turn this. I'll always be dealing with this. As you were mentioning that, I'm thinking, yeah, that was a part of my kind of narrative that I fed myself, and I'm glad that that's changed now. But I definitely, when you were saying that, I'm like, man, that definitely hits home for me. Marcia, we're getting towards the end here. I want to ask you, what would your advice be towards anyone who is trying to start a spiritual journey now? Maybe they've just never had a relationship with Jesus, God. And they're thinking, man, I feel like I need that in my life. I'm not sure how I even start that, how I take the first step towards that. What would your advice be for someone in that position?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, certainly they can call us. We can have a conversation, a very open conversation. But if you're seeking, honestly, you just go in and you just pray and just say, Jesus, I am seeking. I'm seeking and I'm asking. And I don't know what life looks like with you, but I'd love to know what life looks like with you. And I'd really love to accept you as my Lord and Savior and allow for you to have the space in my life and to bring healing and to experience you in the way I was created. And I just pray, Father, that in this that you do transform my mind into the newness as you tell us daily to come and seek the mind of Christ. And then I would really encourage them to get a great mentor to walk them through this aspect. And again, they can call us, we can help them, we can encourage them, we can pray with them. But you need to have the follow-up of where do I go? What information so that I am not it's just like if you're dating someone, if you're not engaging with them, then the relationship's not going to move forward. If you're not communicating continually with them, be an enrichment of that intimacy. So we really want to help you understand this is not about religion. It is about relationship. Jesus came to die for you. He came to die to have you have hope and to live in a resurrected life. And that means it's an ongoing all day kind of communion and relationship. And it truly is one of the most beautiful relationships you'll ever have because everything from here then comes out here. So our vertical relationship with the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is displayed in our horizontal relationships within our lives. And so there's just, to me, that would be the encouragement, Drew, for them to seek. And he says, who seeks me, he will find me. But then to find a really good person or church that they can get in a Bible study or have some mentoring, because I personally think that's important. I even still have people among me that I consider to be my mentors, and we always want to have that. We should always have that surrounding in our life.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's, I tried to do everything when I was trying to crawl out of addiction. I tried to do it all on my own. I kind of viewed it as this, hey, look, I put myself here. I'm going to have to get myself out type thing. And the reality was I just couldn't do it. I tried for so many years. And then I reached a point finally where I'm like, why am I trying to do all this on my own? Like, I'm making this way harder than it needs to be. And of course, that's when I started meeting people. I totally agree with the mentors and kind of building that kind of community and stuff like that. I totally agree with that. I think it's like I reached a point where I'm like, why am I trying to do this on my own? Like, not only is it not working, but why am I forcing myself? Why am I making this harder on myself?
Well,
So
that's kind of a death sentence too. When you're doing it all on your own, you get worse and worse. And we were
yeah,
created for community. I want to tell everyone you're created for community. Find the safe people, invite them in, and let them heal you. And again, we are a safe community. We know the battle. We're going to walk with you. And you want people that have tools and skills. You just can't go to anyone, because some people are going to mislead you with some nonsense stuff. So you want to make sure what you're getting is actually going to be beneficial to your journey in your healing and in applying to your life.
yeah. And as you were saying that, I remember going to this. I went to this sober living one time, and well, I thought it was sober living, but I showed up and I went to throw something away in the trash, and there's all these beer bottles and wine and I'm like, okay, so it's like I think that's a great point. You want to make sure where you're going is going to be beneficial to you. You want to check it out. You want to see. I want to ask one last question here, Marcia. How do you maintain after everything you've been through? You're helping a lot of people. You're coaching people. You have a great understanding of all these different tools and stuff. What keeps your mental health good? What do you think are like two things that help you the most with feeling either balanced or just having solid mental health at the end of the day?
I spend time every day with the Lord. I too have heart syncing done by professionals to me, because I am a believer that if you're practicing something and you're helping others, then you better be allowing it to be part of your practice. And I believe in having moments. I go to the beach almost every weekend. True. It's so revitalizing, and I think we have to have those things in our life that we know are healthy and healing for us, that we engage in. And I do that. And I do it without any kind of excuse. I just do it. So find the things that are healing, and I do those things that are healing for me, that keep me able to be present with my family, present with my husband and my kids, and present with those that are close to me, so that I'm not, and I don't take on, what I am doing, because I don't have the authority to heal you. I do have the authority to bring you to the one who does heal. So I'm not taking that on. I'm not adding to a suitcase or creating a suitcase.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. Like not yeah, you're basically putting them hand in hand with the one who can and
Yes.
not yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that because there's times where I tried to help people with stuff, and I'm like, I'm assuming all of this extra. The suitcases are adding up on my end,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I just couldn't do it. So, Marcia, thank you so much for taking the time to come on here. And anyone listening, I will put all the links, website, the book on there. I'll put everything in the episode details. So, thank you, Marcia.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
To the 2.5 people that watched this till the very end, thank you. If you want to come on the show, reach out to me, soberfixpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your story. Otherwise, drop a comment. Let me know how long you've been sober. What is helping you stay sober? What obstacles are you running into? And what are you doing about it? How are you overcoming those? How are you living each day sober? I love hearing all that stuff, guys. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you for the support. Thank you for watching. See you next week.